available point. iVALT, first we realized that identity, as it was defined in the industry, was about credentials and devices, not human beings. So the evolution in the technology was to add things to protect passwords, things like complex passwords, secret questions, even two-factor authentication, which everybody hates. And so these could still be stolen, and we knew that biometrics would still be coming. So we were in this place where we realized biometrics would be here, but we believed that biometrics would become vulnerable to AI over time. So what we did was we looked at this and we believed that the identity pair or the technology parity between the hackers and the good guys that have been going on for 30 years would just continue. It's sort of the spy versus spy cartoon that sort of depicted the Cold War. But we still believe that we could change the game. So today's webinar is about our approach and the progress we've made in creating a sustainable and future-proof identity solution. So I'm going to start with a couple of introductions here. First of all, Baldev has started and built multiple successful companies with several exits. He holds a number of patents, 5 of which are with iVALT alone. And he was twice nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year in Silicon Valley, which is quite an accomplishment. And you may have heard of Roland Hansen or heard his name in the context of many stories that have been written about Microsoft. He was the VP at Microsoft and is the legendary person who branded Microsoft Windows. And he's had a lot of successes since then in creating household recognizable brands. And he is now running our strategy for our company. Now, just as a housekeeping thing, we're not going to take questions during this session. There are comments that can be made on LinkedIn. Please reach out to us via email, and I'll put up our addresses and things at the end, and then we'll respond to everyone as we go along. Okay, so we're going to get started here. I'm going to turn off my video just so we can not be distracting here. First of all, this is a slide everyone starts with, okay? Identity fraud is out of control. We all know this. But most notably, since January of 2023, there's hundreds of billions of dollars have been lost, which is nothing new. But there have been 2 events that are pretty noteworthy. First of all, the mother of all breaches, as it's been called, 26 billion records stolen, many of which had been stolen before. And the hackers have this sort of mantra that is steal now, decrypt later, which means that it needs to be protected with post-quantum encryption, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So that's a really big problem that these breaches are still happening after 30 years of trying to fix it. And in 2024, in February, $25 million were lost on a deepfake video call where the hackers created bots that looked like people on the executive team, and they convinced someone to transfer $25 million. And so the fraud with AI and deepfakes is just going to continue. It's going to get worse. And our view is, in order to do this right, you really have to redefine identity as it's been used today. So moving on here, there are really 2 critical needs for identity. And these are really important to understand that if you cover these 2 areas, you pretty much cover every use case. The first is, on the left-hand side here, is the access to data systems, devices, and accounts. This is everyone getting access to stuff. So if we're trying to access anything, you have to have the ability to get in safely and be the trusted person at the endpoint. So that's the first thing. We call that one-click zero trust. It's the 5 factors, which I'll talk about in a minute. It's shared control between the company and the user, so they can each have accountability and responsibility for their identity. And then equally important is the idea to be able to identify people in real time on calls and texts. So in order to cover everything, you've got to be able to do this as well. And so we have a service that we call On-Demand ID, which is really deepfake protection, and it stops scam callers. So you get a phone call and you can force someone to identify themselves at the other end using the iVALT app. And the person on the other end has the iVALT app. You ping their mobile phone, they show their face, and you've identified them. And this stops scam calls, it stops deepfake. And it also allows for legitimate callers to identify themselves prior to a conversation. You get a call from your insurance agent. You don't believe it's them. They can identify themselves definitively to you before the conversation starts. And what's really important about all of this is it needs to all work together. It has to be one click. It has to be on the same platform using the same identity. And that's what we've created. We call it our identity validation platform. We use 5 factors, and we can have more factors, which I'll explain. And you do this in real time. So it happens in one click, and instantaneously you can identify the other person. So 5-factor identity, this is what we talk about and what we're doing. This is for protecting the enterprise. And I'll start with the blue box. This is our identity validation platform. The 5 factors I'm going to talk about today are, first of all, the device ID we verify, and device ID we captured at registration of the mobile app, and I'll cover a little bit more of that in a minute. The biometrics, which can be Face ID, that's what we use today, but we've also integrated with other biometrics modalities, so things like speech recognition or behavioral characteristics. We capture location and time. Now, if you think about location, and an executive is calling in, or business colleagues are talking to each other, and one of them doubts the other's identity, or there's any kind of issue there, uh, they can ping each other and identify each other by locations and set locations. So each user can either set their own location or have the company set the location, and only those locations can be used for authentication. So for an executive like a CEO, this would be their home and their office, and maybe their admin sets it for the hotel and the business customers' location. That's it. So no one can hack into their identity or use their accounts during that location or during that time frame. And then application codes are simply encrypted identity between the application and what we have registered as an application. And then the little blue box on the right side there is dynamic variables. And we have a number of those that we can use, and we have IP around this. So if you think of two-factor authentication, where it's two mathematical algorithms, or a mathematical algorithm being run on two sides, so the server runs it and the device runs it, and you get the same number, and then it matches and logs you in. You can do the same thing with dynamic variables, and these can be high-low temperatures of cities. It can be stock pricing. It can be any number of things, as well as external variables that can be imported into the devices for each authentication. So the identifiers are unique, they're independent, they're customizable, and there's an escalation path. And the escalation path is things like the biometrics. If I get a biometric from someone and it's not good enough, you can escalate to another modality of biometrics. And this is all because we built this on a platform that is connected to the authentication process for the enterprise. So the way this works is you have the identity request, comes into iVALT. iVALT pings the mobile phone. The person responds with their biometrics, and then they take along with that authentication the passive parameters, if you will, that go along, the other factors. And then those are verified, and we verify these not just in a data that can be caught in the middle and used to replicate or to impersonate someone. We can have multiple different authentication sources. So the location and the time, the geofencing could be done by the individual. The biometrics are managed by the company you're connecting with, and on it goes from there. And again, this can be used for anywhere, anytime, any application, because this is from a mobile phone. Okay, so I'm going to show a demo here in a minute so you can see this. First of all, on the left-hand side here is my mobile phone, and on the right-hand side here is a website we call On Demand ID, and we use that for emulating various use cases. So the use cases that we talk about and that we've already done demos with and are doing this with customers are things like IAM, where identity and access management. So instead of having two-factor authentication where you type the digits, it pings your phone and you show your face and it logs you in. Again, everyone hates two-factor authentication, so this solves that problem. And we have integrated this with two of the leading two-factor authentication companies, one being Auth0 and the other one being Ping Identity. We've done this. We have a WordPress solution that can be downloaded from wordpress.org for WordPress admins that can be used with our app on the other end, the standard app that you download from the website. We can stop deepfakes, as I mentioned before. You can ping users and have them identify themselves and get the specific information back. I'll show that in a second here. Physical access, you think about going in your office door and you hold your key card and opens the door. Well, how do I know it's really you? So when you hit the key card, it can ping your phone, you show your face, and now you know that the person with the key card is actually the person authorized to use the key card, and that it wasn't a lost or stolen key card. Passwordless, this is a passwordless demo here. It's a phone number instead of a username and password. And I'll show how you can get to passwordless very fast in the enterprise without disrupting everything. It can be used for mobile wallets and payments. It can also use it in the wallet world. There's identity wallets where you can release just the credentials that are necessary for particular application, whether it's a credit card number or some medical information, etc. So whatever is needed is authenticated by you, and then you only release what you want to release. And then we've done things in IoT where we're the login capabilities of getting to a cloud-based solution and then using that to manage a lot of devices. And then also the ability to push code to those devices so that you can delegate people to be able to go fix a device. So for example, someone who's the administrator of that device might be hundreds of miles away from where something has to be fixed. They can push the mobile number of the person, the service person, and it to the device, and then the device will allow that person to authenticate with the device and then provide the services necessary. Okay, so I'm going to show how this works, and this starts with my mobile number, as you can see there, and we're going to send the request, and that's going to go to, you see it sending a request. It's going to go to the phone. If you look to the left here, you see the authentication request come. I click on that. It sends it to Face ID because I have an iPhone, and then it will authenticate in the background, and you see it authenticates successfully. It's capturing the data to do the 5 factors that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And the first factor is who is being authenticated here. In this case, it is Brian, it's me. My biometrics were matched on my phone. And again, it could have been any other source of biometrics. The device is trusted. It was the one that was registered with iVALT. And then we capture GPS location and timestamp. And the GPS location, again, can be used for geofencing, where you don't allow anyone to get in at any other places except what are set, which really, really closes down the ability to hack in. And then time windowing is the same way. No one can hack into my accounts at 3 o'clock in the morning because they can't get in at 3 o'clock in the morning, even if everything else failed. And then the last one is the source ID, which is really just an encrypted code that we use between our applications and things that we know about. So we make sure that the person coming in is using the correct authentication. So that's how this works with all of our use cases. So how secure is this? Well, we've had this validated by TextLayers, and TextLayers is a company they're basically white hat hackers. And so they're former hackers that have come in and have tested everything in our system. They've done penetration testing. We have another firm doing it right now as well, just to see how strong this is. And again, we have the identity of who, what, when, where, and why. And each of these are validated and verified in a different way. So they can be from multiple sources, which makes it very difficult for a hacker because they have to know all of the parameters that are set for the authentication in advance. And it's a dynamic set of authenticators. So these are dynamic variables. Where am I now? What time interval is it? And then a variety of, as I mentioned, the dynamic variables that can be things like temperature and other dynamic numbers. And then there's an escalation path here. I can go down the path of biometrics to multiple modalities. The register ID can be multiple things, the time, and then we can do things like GPS location is a really interesting thing. That's what we use. We don't use IP address. And you can escalate this into a whole lot of things like Wi-Fi proximity. It can be proximity to people. It can be proximity or signal strength from cell sites. There's a whole lot of things you can do here that get into more the government space. And then there's just a lot of things you can do around the app, the secrets on the app IDs, et cetera. So what this does is it creates a dynamic authentication that's nearly impossible for someone to hack. Okay, so taking a step back for a minute to how do we get to one click? Okay, that's a pretty big claim that you can do all this in one click. You saw how the data was captured in one click. But how do you do this with the infrastructure that already exists, the authentication infrastructure, without ripping everything apart and making changes to the existing processes? So if you start on the left here, you see we are here. Today, it's basically an email address, a password, and then 6 digits that are pulled from a two-factor authentication app like Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, et cetera. It could also be an SMS message, it could be an email. All these things are inconvenient. You have to look them up and then type the numbers into the boxes in order to log in. So that's the state of the art today. The first step in working with iVALT is you start using the iVALT app for authentication. And it's just one click, you show your face, it comes back and already says it's your device, it's your face, the locations, the geofencing, all that can be enforced as well. And that's stronger, certainly stronger than 2FA already, and is arguably stronger than what was in place before. And then you can take the next step, which is you don't need the password anymore anyway, because it's not contributing anything. And you take the email address and change it to the mobile number. Email address is used by everybody for everything. So mobile, why not the mobile number as being the universal username, if you will? And then what happens then is you put in your mobile number, and this can be done online, but it can be done for physical access and a variety of other places where you just enter a number. And then it pings your phone, you show your 5 factors, come back, you're authenticated and you're in. So what this does with the enterprise is it stops identity hacks because you can't just throw passwords at it. That's not going to solve it. Brute force attacks. You're protecting the servers, the edge devices, et cetera. And it stops deepfakes. It's kind of a side benefit between if employees want to verify identity between them. So it's a pretty powerful solution for the enterprise. And one thing I want to point out here is we are a human identifier for human beings. So we're verifying that, okay? And just that. So we work with all the emerging technologies, including the public-private key, encryption models like FIDO2 and other things where that is really proving and connecting a device to another device. In that process, there's always the question that comes up, do you really mean to do this? And when that you really mean to do it question comes up, you have to say yes, no at a minimum. But what if you authenticate with iVALT at that point in one click, and that makes this authentication, it's the right person going through that process. And then going even further, we're doing integrations right now with post-quantum encryption. I'll speak a little bit more about that in a minute. Okay, so I talked about how easy it is to integrate it on the enterprise side. So how do you get the one-click zero trust in days, not months? And so we provide a free mobile app that's available right now. You can download it after this call if you want. It's on the app stores. We have free redirect code, which is in this NPM link, where you can go get the code and the libraries and everything that's necessary to use the iVALT system. And then we also provide free IoT device code. Okay, so this makes it very, very low cost and difficulty to start using iVALT. Now, the way that companies work with us is we have our own cloud, but this can be on-premise. But for the sake of discussion here, it's a secure SaaS tenant. We are hosted on AWS. We have the tightest security. Our CTO is an expert on AWS. So we have this all up, it's scalable and the highest security, et cetera. And then there's two pieces to this. There's the tenant, and then there's also the user portal. So the way this works, it's really simple, is the company goes in and creates a unique ID code when they set this up. It's an ID connection is what we call it. So if I'm XYZ company, my code could be XYZ. Now users could download the free app over here, and they just go to the part of the app. There's a button you click and it opens up a box that says ID connections on their mobile device, and they just hit plus and they put in XYZ and enter. And what happens is it sends a message and puts the XYZ administrator on their console. They see Brian wants to become a part of this, and he just simply looks at, is Brian someone we should authenticate? And he clicks yes, and now I am authorized to use iVALT's with the new company. And if you think about this from an IT perspective, as IT managers start using this for lots of systems to get access to the back-end systems, they actually start to build a one-click biometrics authenticator. And so instead of using 3 different authenticators with 20 servers on them, they can literally create something that's one-click biometric authentication for all of those access points. And for individuals, this could be all the normal websites that you visit. Okay, so just by way of just showing a few use cases for enterprise, let's start with the critical systems. Now you require biometrics, among other things, to verify the users getting into the critical systems. Employees have access to systems as well and have to use iVALT as designated for the high-risk access points. It can also be used for physical access as a part of that. The same ID can be used for that. And then customer-facing employees. So you think account manager calls someone up and they say, I don't know if you're the account manager or not. You want me to put money in, whatever. The account manager says, just go to our website, click here and enter this mobile number. They do, and it comes back and it says, Brian, account manager. So that allows the customer-facing employees to identify themselves. This could be field tech people that are standing at your front door as another example. And then similarly, customers can identify themselves in one click. So the account manager can ping the customer's mobile phone, they show their face, it comes back and it says, hey, it's really them. And then you have the control systems. And then on the IT side, this can manage traveling and remote workers, even video calls, going back to that example I gave at the very beginning. And it's very difficult to, instead of trying to tell people how to interpret social engineering and deepfake and scam calls, the policy could be simply, you have to identify yourself in order to get any information. And the way you would identify yourself is with iVALT. And if you can't identify yourself, you're getting no information from the outside. But there's now a mechanism that doesn't rely on the person receiving the phone call to determine whether it's a fake call or not. There's an actual technology mechanism to assure you have the right person. So in terms of other products and direction we're going, I've listed a few icons on the bottom of companies that we're working with. I mentioned post-quantum encryption. This is really exciting area. We are integrating right now to put post-quantum encryption protection on the links that we use to authenticate users. So the ability for someone to steal the information in transit is much more difficult. And we're even at the place where we're taking the user credentials, whatever they are, and putting them inside the post-quantum encryption tunnel. And if you do that, there are no man-in-the-middle attacks because there is no way to get access to the path. And this is the strongest combination for security. So we see rolling out a solution that has this included in it. So when you set it up for an enterprise, it would be post-quantum encrypted for the zero trust identity solution that you connect to your overall infrastructure. IoT and physical access, I mentioned that before. This really is the coming together of IoT. You can't see this too well, but IoT, This is IoT, it would be IIoT, et cetera. This is IT IoT and IIoT. So the idea being you have one identity in the IT system. You can now use that for anything related to the IoT devices that are on premise. And then also you want to be able to have control over who's flipping the switches on the electrical grid, or who's changing pipe settings, or flow or turning on valves, et cetera. And this is embedded code. It's also cloud management. And then locks. We're working on a project right now for physical access to storage units. So imagine you walk up to the storage unit, and the old days you just had a bicycle lock on there basically, but uh, the more sophisticated ones now have actual electronic locks, and they have keypads and the whole thing. And so what we can do is you enter your mobile number in the keypad, and it pings your phone. You show your face. It knows you're there. It knows it's your device, and your biometrics match, and the door opens. Similarly, if someone's lease expires at the end of the month, the next day you just put in the next number that is validated to unlock that lock. And it's very simple from an administration standpoint. So there are tons of opportunities in that space, not to mention the entering locks, as I mentioned before, being able to swipe key cards and then have to authenticate yourself as well. The content authenticity is a big market. This is being able to identify people before they post on social media. That stops a lot of problems. We need to partner in that space. We've not done that yet, but we have some leads into that. And then digital identity is things like documents. We are working on some things that embed personal identity into documents like PDF for the life cycle of the document. And then also for digital signatures, you get a document to sign, and it's a protected document, but all you have to know is the last four digits of the social security number to get in, basically. And then AI directed. This is basically just optimizing the variables that we're capturing. And so I'll skip to this. This is basically full circle. We've come back to what our focus is. We started out with one identity on a mobile phone for every use case using biometrics. And where we are now is it's really every vertical. For every vertical market, you can use this. It's human identity at the endpoint. And it has to be compatible and future-proof. You have to be able to see how this goes forward by adding more and more variables and making the authentication more challenging. And then it has to be one click user experience. People love that. And then the idea of the highest security. And so you see the intersection points, and we believe we're at the center of this. We can provide all of this, and especially these three huge characteristics that are necessary for every vertical market. So that's all I have. Thank you so much for your time. We have some QR codes here if you want to download the mobile app. If you want to reach out to us at info@iVALT.com. Again, it's iVALT is IVALT, as you can see here. And then please connect with us. You can go to our website. You can put comments on LinkedIn and email for questions. We will get back to you, and we'll set up calls or whatever you'd like to do. But we'd really love to get your feedback on what I spoke about today, and how you see this fitting with things in the identity industry. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you taking the time today to talk with us, or to meet with us. Thank you.